Okay, straight into our first debate then. And is Rishi Sunak right to ban smoking for anyone born after 2008? Here's the number, 0207 862 2222. Get those calls in now. As we discussed earlier, the Prime Minister has announced a phased cigarette ban at his conference speech yesterday. Take a look at this.
We must tackle the single biggest, entirely preventable cause of ill health, disability and death, and that is smoking. So I propose that in future, we raise the smoking age by 1 year every year. That means a 14-year-old today will never legally be sold a cigarette, and that they and their generation can grow up smoke-free.
So anyone under the age of 15 will never be able to buy cigarettes legally. It's divided the Conservative Party, with Sunak even allowing his MPs to vote on this issue as they please. Despite that, though, the policy is expected to go through Parliament and be made law. Do you think this is a good thing, Imarn?
Okay, so I can see where he's going. Obviously, he's trying to deal with a serious issue in terms of health, but I personally think he's got his priorities mixed up, right? So smoking for young people has actually decreased. He didn't add that in his speech. And then other things like vaping, alcohol, drug abuse and mental health issues has increased, and yet that doesn't seem to be his focus.
Well, he did mention vaping, didn't he? And he wants to decrease vaping, particularly in young people.
But let's be clear, the rules and laws are still the same, right? It's against the law to vape if you're under the age of 18. It's against the law to buy vapes if you're under. The same with smoking, right? So as far as I'm concerned, these laws are already in place in terms of you can't be under the age of 18. And yet we're seeing 15, 16, 17-year-olds smoking and vaping, in spite of the fact that it's against the law. So as far as I'm concerned, let's just deal with the kind of elephant in the room, which is these young people are finding an alternative means to smoke. So irrespective of whether you ban smoking or stop young people from buying cigarettes, it doesn't negate the fact that they will always find a way to smoke if that's what they want to do.
Wilfred, what do you think?
I just think it's a ridiculous policy. You know, what you must never do is go down the route of banning things, because the moment
we ban heroin.
Well, yeah, but there are certain things that we should ban because actually it can have a massive impact to people's lives and health. But something like smoke, I used to be a smoker, okay? And I stopped smoking because over time I was then informed that smoking was going to be bad for my health. I had the choice and the responsibility of stopping smoking, not somebody telling me...
But with that thought pattern, Wilfred, let's legalise heroin and just inform people that it is going to be bad for their health, and then they can make their own choice as to whether they want to use it or not.
Listen, but we might get to a stage, actually, where rather than having all the resources and money trying to police things, actually, you make it legal, and therefore, actually, it's then down to that person's responsibility. I could see that some drugs will be legalised because the amount of time and effort we put in is just not going to be sort of practical. So going down the route of banning things, I don't think is necessarily the sensible thing.
The policing element is interesting, actually.
But in my case, a lot of people, it's all about the education. It's got to come down to personal responsibility. You can't always take personal responsibility and say, therefore, the state is determining that. And the thing about young people is this, is that they will always find some way. I mean, what about this glue sniffing, for example? Yeah. There'll be something that they will experiment with until actually eventually they learn this is a stupid thing to do.
But maybe we should make cigarettes the thing that they're going to experiment with.
You can't
just
determine
make the
it. I don't know.
legislation tighter and tighter.
You can't determine what it is. It might be petrol.
But I agree with you. Everyone has vices, and I think we're kind of ignoring another elephant in the room, which is why do people pick up vices? A lot of times it's due to some type of stress, right? So young people are under all different types of stress. The aforementioned points I mentioned, as well as bullying. Hold on a second, Wilfred. There's bullying, there's sexism, misogyny, racism, peer pressure, eating disorders, all talk.
Keep rubbing me like that, then give my back massage.
Right, while you two make friends, I'm going to bring another voice into this one. So let's speak to anti-smoking campaigner Ailsa Rutter. Ailsa is the director of Fresh and Balance, an organisation dedicated to reducing the harm from tobacco and alcohol. Good morning, Ailsa. Thank you for joining us. Do you welcome this ban then?
I absolutely welcome what the Prime Minister has said, and he's absolutely hit the nail on the head. Smoking is our biggest killer. It's our key driver of health inequalities. It's 1 in 4 cancer deaths. In fact, 16 cancers are caused by smoking. And what I'd like to pose to everybody is, if cigarettes didn't exist, but they were to come on the market now, and we know they are guaranteed to kill 2 in 3 long-term users, and the vast majority of smokers get hooked in childhood, there would be an outcry. We wouldn't allow it. This is a uniquely lethal product. That's why it absolutely is the right thing to do, to say we must do everything we can to stop a whole new generation from dying 10, 15 years early from completely avoidable smoking-related illnesses. It's not an adult choice. It's a childhood addiction. I work with smokers every day. They want to stop. They wish they hadn't got hooked as a kid, and they desperately don't want their own kids to fall into the same trap.
Ailsa, I think the concern will be, where does this end? Because you said it's the biggest killer, but actually the biggest expense for the NHS is obesity. So are they going to take away our fizzy drinks and our sweets too?
Well, I get that there are other big priorities, but smoking is the most tangible thing that we can do to address health inequalities. And it's not just about health, Storm, it's the burden on social care. And the people actually who bear the biggest brunt of this is workplaces. We need a healthy, productive workforce. Our businesses in the North East don't want people to have to retire early. They're off because of ill health from smoking. It's a win-win-win health, wealth, economy, and also for people's own income as well. We know smoking's a big driver of poverty, but we're so proud in the North East of the work we do. We've got such great support across the NHS and local authorities, and we work with our local communities. We know that people actually say, you know what, smoking had a beginning, it's had a middle, but it absolutely needs to have an end.
Well, are we going to do the same thing then with alcohol? Should we see a phase out of
alcohol?
alcohol?
Alcohol is far, far more of a problem than smoking.
Well, I don't know in terms of health, but let's hear from Ailsa.
I absolutely agree that we're sitting on a time bomb with alcohol as well. Alcohol-related deaths are at a 20-year high, and we do need to learn from tobacco in terms of alcohol. But I think the difference here is smoking is uniquely lethal. There is every single cigarette that you have is doing your body damage, and this is not about free choice. Smokers don't have free choice; they're addicted. Most of them are starting as teenagers, and the fact of the matter is, for every one person who dies, like my dad died at 61 of COPD, you've got about 30 people out there living with most appalling smoking-related illnesses, COPD being the absolutely classic example. But, this is wanted. The public are so behind this.
Well,
69% support already.
It's an interesting point that you make, that actually the public are behind this. And I think broadly you're probably right. So the number of smokers are reducing all the time. I think we're down to something like 12%. What is the point in banning them?
That's my point.
So yes, we've made great progress, but we're talking in some of our communities, smoking rates way, way, way higher, particularly with serious mental illness and other key priority groups. And we absolutely recognise that more support needs to be there to support people to stop. And I think the headlines today are around raising the age of sale to 21, but there are also important announcements made, such as doubling the funding to the Stop Smoking services. We also have a whole generation of people who haven't been exposed to the hard-hitting health campaigns that we've been able to run in the North East, but nowhere else in the country has seen it. And the knowledge and the awareness of the fact smoking causes 16 types of cancer, heart disease, stroke and things is actually going down in a young generation. So there is a real risk actually that smoking rates could go up.
But does prohibition actually work? Because we've seen it with alcohol, and then we just get it driven underground. We get gangs created because of it. We get criminality created because of it. Our prisons are already full. Our police can't cope. How is this going to work? Also, we'll end up getting cigarettes laced with all sorts of other things that are going to damage our health even further and affect the NHS.
Well, I think that the devil in the detail of this one. So what the Prime Minister announced was the New Zealand model. There are other ways that this could be done. I think the key message today is the overall principle of, why do we want to allow a future generation to potentially get hooked to just such a uniquely lethal product? It's kind of guaranteed to kill 2 and 3 of them. And I think how this will actually work, that's for the consultation. We can look into that. And there does need to be more funding given to our trading standards teams across the country, etc. And, we do welcome that. There's no silver bullet as such. But, I do genuinely believe that that this debate is a really good one to have. Let's go back to that thing. Cigarettes don't exist, but we introduced them to the market today. And those manufacturers would tell you they're going to kill 2 and 3 of their long-term customers. Nobody wants that.